Howdy, I'm Willie. Folks around here just call me Windmill Willie. I'm going to tell you a little about the museum and all the windmills you see here today. Now, your folks probably came here from all over the world like mine did. In other countries, they have the big Dutch-style windmills with the long blades for grinding wheat and pumping water to clear the dikes. Those were mainly shallow wells, not deep wells like you find out here on the plains. Let me tell you something I bet you didn't know. It was Colonel Colt's revolver, barbed wire, and the windmill that helped settle the West. That's right, the repeating rifle or Colonel Colt's six-shooter, barbed wire, and the windmill were three of the most important inventions that helped settle the Great Plains. I think you should put the windmill right on the top of that list, because without water, you can't survive. As you drive across the plains today, you'll still see windmills standing on homesteads. They were planted there like a flag. It was proud. It was something that someone put up to say, here we are, and here we're going to stay. We've invested in this land. We put a windmill up. We have water for drinking, for the livestock, maybe a little left over for the garden, maybe even an orchard or a tree or two. The windmill was like a flag. It marked your land and said, I'm here and I'm going to stay. I'm going to make it. Let's make that the first lesson we learned about the museum. All the windmills here are for pumping water. The most common question people ask me, they say, Willie, how deep will a windmill pump water? Well, believe it or not, these big windmills will lift water from 1,000 feet. That's right, folks, 1,000 feet deep. They're amazing, simple machines that can do a lot of work. So let's make lesson number 2. The bigger the wind wheel, the deeper it'll pump. That big railroad eclipse windmill over there with all the small wooden blades, that's right, it was called the railroad eclipse because it was manufactured for the railroads to pump water for the steam engines. And its big brother, the Samson windmill, with the big metal blades. They can pump water from a long ways down or a lot of volume. They're amazing machines. Now take a look at the roof of the little house. See that small little wind propeller over there? It looks like an airplane with 2 wooden blades on it. That is a wind turbine, and it was made to power a battery so you could listen to the radio. What a luxury it was to be out in the middle of nowhere with no electricity and be able to charge a battery and listen to the radio. It kept you in touch with the rest of the world. That's the only windmill you'll see here that doesn't pump water, but it was an important part of the early settler's life. Some of the windmills you'll see here today are extremely rare, especially the grandfather of all the windmills, the Halliday red, white, and blue windmill that's inside of the red barn to protect it. It's fragile and rare. There's very few of them known to exist. No matter where you are in the park, you can see several different types of windmills. Now, I'm not talking about whether they're wood or steel. I'm talking about the way they self-regulate. Self-regulating windmills. That was the key to the American windmill. Its ability to slow down the wind wheel in high speeds. Y'all know how hard the wind can blow here out on the plains. It's amazing. The windmill has to be able to turn out of the wind or slow itself down in some way to keep it from blowing apart. If you've ever driven down the highway and gotten a flat tire, or maybe rock or mud in your tires, you know what I'm talking about. The whole car starts to shake. Well, imagine a windmill standing out here alone, spinning away in one of these straight line winds. An important thing to note is a windmill has to be able to control the wind wheel speed or it's going to come apart. Guaranteed. Notice how some of these windmills look like an umbrella all folded up? Well, that's one of the ways they control their speed. Centrifugal force causes the different wheel sections to fold in. They sort of do look like an umbrella, don't they? Another way to control the speed is to change the way the wind faces the windmill. That's to say that the big tail vane always faces the wind. So the wind wheel will turn sideways out of the wind. and then a counterbalance weight or spring would pull it back into the wind to start pumping when the wind slowed down. Some of these counterbalance weights can be very decorative. You'll note that some of them are shaped as animals, some are stars, half moons, all sorts of different kinds of windmill weights. They're really interesting, and they became trademarks that different companies were known for. Take a look around, see how many you can find. I bet you notice now that there's a lot of wooden blade windmills, and there's a lot of steel blade windmills. Well, about 1870 or so, they started to make a transition from wood to steel. Wood was easy to manufacture, it was easy to obtain, and it was easy for the farmer to repair if there was damage. Now, my grandfather was a Ford man. My uncle was a Chevy man. And the two would never agree. And when they made the transition between wood and steel, I'm sure my grandfather and my uncle would have been right there taking sides and choosing one over the other. But we know through series of tests that the curved metal blade windmill is much more efficient in its ability to pump water, not only in depth and volumes, but at a lower wind speed. So the transition was made from wood blades to steel for the efficiency of use. Look up at the windmills. Do you see that some of them have exposed gears? Others have metal covers? Well, about 1912, 1914 or so, they introduced the oil bath windmill. Those are the windmills that are completely covered up. You don't see any gears or moving parts. They run in a bath of oil. Could you imagine having to climb up there every week in a cold winter storm to lubricate the moving parts, maybe with goose grease or whatever you had? My, that must have been a terrible task. But it was required to get up there and lubricate those parts. The invention of the oil bath windmill was a huge change in the world of windmills. Now, I've been telling you to look here and look there, but let's just close our eyes and let's listen to the sound of the windmills. A gentle moan, a squeak, a click, a clack. The windmill was a lullaby for many kids growing up on the farms. It also was the weather forecaster. The windmill's turning quick and facing the north. It's going to rain tonight. A quiet, still night, and then all of a sudden you were wide awake of the sound of the windmill. Here comes a thunderstorm. My gosh, maybe even a tornado. The windmill was one of the most reliable weather forecasters you could find in rural America. Now there's even the story of the farmer who was out at the barn and caught up in a blizzard. Couldn't see a thing, a complete whiteout. The only way he made it back to the house was the sound of the windmill turning. He knew where he was in relationship to the squeaky windmill. He followed that sound that took him to the house and credited the windmill with saving his life. Now my grandfather told me a story. He said it was true, but I'll let you decide. He was a young bachelor cowboy, riding around on the Oklahoma plains, and jobs were hard to find. He was willing to work, but there was just no jobs. So he would ride out, tie his horse up, climb up on the saddle, put his hands up to his ears and cup 'em, and listen for the sound of a noisy windmill. If he heard a squeak or a moan, a click, a clack, or a bang, he'd get back on that horse and he'd head to that farm. He'd watch careful like to make sure that the farmer had hitched up the team and left the house. Then he would sneak up to the back door, and he would tell the farmer's wife that if she fed him, he'd climb up there and fix that windmill. Let me tell you, if you've ever listened to a bang, bang, bang all day long of a broken blade, well, you knew my grandfather eat pretty well. He'd climb up that tower with some rawhide leather, and he'd latch up that windmill blade that was making noise and make a farmer's wife pretty happy. He said he ate like a king. Now, I don't know if that story's true or not, but I think it could be. What do you think? People say, Willie, what happened to all the windmills? Well, during the Great Depression in the 1930s, the government introduced the Rural Electrification Act. That brought electricity out to the rural farms and all through the cities. Windmills were replaced by electric water pumps. Then came World War II. Windmills were valuable as recyclable material to help the war effort. So people took their windmills down. They took them to the government scrap metal collection drive to help win the war. Now, if you came in the middle of this, don't worry, it's going to start again. And excuse me for talking your ear off, but you get old Willie talking about windmills, it's hard to stop me. If you want more information, you can call the museum at 580-938-5291. You can arrange for a group tour, more information, or just give us a call, 580-938-5291. And take a minute, throw a few dollars in that old collection box. It takes a lot of hard work by a dedicated group of volunteers to keep this place going. If you could help us out, we'd sure appreciate it.